Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our English listening podcast. My name is Anna, and I'm so happy you are here with me again today. If this is your first time listening, don't worry. Every episode, I tell you a story in clear, simple English. You just relax, listen, and let the story take you somewhere new. Today, we start a new story, and this one is very special to me, because it takes place in England, my home country. We will follow a young man named James on his journey to London, and we will discover the culture, the history, and the beautiful little details of English life together. So, get comfortable, maybe make yourself a cup of tea, and let's begin. James Carter was 24 years old, and he had never left his small hometown before. He grew up in a quiet village in the north of England, surrounded by green hills and sheep. His life there was simple and calm. But James always dreamed of something bigger. He wanted to see the world, or at least, he wanted to see London. One cold morning in October, James packed 2 large suitcases and said goodbye to his parents. His mother cried a little, and his father shook his hand and said, "Be careful, son. London is a big place." James smiled and promised he would call every week. The train journey from his village to London took almost 4 hours. James sat by the window and watched the countryside change. First, there were green fields and small farms. Then, slowly, the fields became towns, and the towns became a huge, grey city. When the train finally arrived at King's Cross station, James felt his heart beating fast. He was excited, but also a little afraid. King's Cross was full of people. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Businessmen walked quickly with coffee cups in their hands. Tourists stood in groups, taking photos of the old station. James stood still for a moment, just looking at everything. It was so different from his quiet village. He had found a small room to rent in a part of London called Camden. The landlady's name was Mrs. Baker, an older woman with grey hair and a warm smile. When James arrived at her house, she opened the door and said, "You must be James. Come in, you look cold. Would you like a cup of tea?" In England, tea is not just a drink. It is a way of welcoming people, a way of showing kindness. James said yes, of course, and Mrs. Baker made him a strong cup of tea with milk. She also gave him 2 biscuits on a small plate. James sat in her kitchen, warming his hands on the cup, and for the first time since he left home, he felt a little more relaxed. "You'll like it here," Mrs. Baker said. "London can be difficult at first, but it has a special kind of magic. You just need to give it time." That night, James lay in his new bed, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window, cars, distant music, someone laughing in the street. It was so different from the silence of his village. He wondered if he had made the right decision. But he also felt something new inside him, a small, quiet excitement for what was coming next. James woke up early the next morning, still tired from the long journey. He walked downstairs, and the smell of food filled the whole house. Mrs. Baker was standing in the kitchen, cooking something in a large frying pan. sit down," she said. "You need a proper English breakfast before your first day in this city." James had never had a full English breakfast before. Mrs. Baker placed a large plate in front of him. On it, there were 2 fried eggs, 2 sausages, a few pieces of bacon, baked beans, a grilled tomato, and a slice of toast. James looked at the plate with wide eyes. "This is a lot of food, Mrs. Baker," he said, laughing. "Nonsense," she replied. "You need energy. London will use it all up by the end of the day." James ate slowly, enjoying every bite. He had to admit, it was delicious. After breakfast, Mrs. Baker gave him a small map of the area and showed him where the nearest underground station was. In London, people call the underground train system the Tube. It is one of the oldest underground railway systems in the world, and it connects almost every part of the city. James had a job interview that day at a small marketing company near the River Thames. He was nervous, so he left the house very early, giving himself extra time in case he got lost. As he walked to the tube station, he noticed how different London felt in the daylight. The streets were full of red buses, black taxis, and people walking quickly in every direction. Old buildings with beautiful architecture stood next to modern glass towers. It felt like a city where the past and the present lived side by side. Inside the tube station, James bought a ticket and stood on the platform, waiting for his train. When the train arrived, it was already full of people, but somehow, everyone managed to fit inside. James held onto a metal pole as the train moved through the dark tunnels beneath the city. He arrived at his interview 15 minutes early. The company's office was in a tall building with large windows looking out over the River Thames. From the waiting room, James could see the water below, and in the distance, he could see one of London's most famous landmarks, the London Eye, a giant wheel that slowly turns, giving people beautiful views of the whole city. The interview went well. The manager, a friendly woman named Sarah, asked James about his experience and his reasons for moving to London. James spoke honestly about his dream of building a new life in the city. At the end of the interview, Sarah smiled and said, "We'll be in touch very soon." James left the building feeling hopeful. He decided to walk along the river for a while before going home, just to enjoy the feeling of being in this new, exciting city. 2 days later, James received a phone call. It was Sarah, the manager from the marketing company. She told him that he got the job, and he could start the following Monday. James was so happy that he almost dropped his phone. He immediately called his parents to share the good news. To celebrate, James decided to spend his last free weekend exploring London properly, like a tourist. He started early in the morning, taking the tube to Westminster. When he came up from the underground station, he saw it immediately: Big Ben, the famous clock tower, standing tall against the grey London sky. Next to it was the Houses of Parliament, an enormous building with beautiful stone details. James stood there for a few minutes, just looking up at the clock. He had seen pictures of Big Ben his whole life, in books and on television, but seeing it in real life felt completely different. It felt real, alive, important. He crossed Westminster Bridge and walked along the south bank of the River Thames. This part of the city was full of street performers, artists selling paintings, and food stalls selling everything from fish and chips to hot chocolate. James bought a portion of fish and chips and sat on a bench by the river, eating slowly and watching the boats go by. Later, he visited the London Eye and paid for a ticket to go up in one of the glass pods. As the wheel slowly turned, James watched the whole city appear below him. He could see the winding River Thames, the historic Tower of London, and in the distance, the modern skyscrapers of the financial district, including a tall, unusually shaped building that people called a gherkin, because of its round shape, like a small cucumber. From up there, London looked enormous, endless, like it went on forever in every direction. James felt very small, but in a good way. He felt like he was finally part of something bigger than his quiet village life. After coming down from the London Eye, James walked toward Covent Garden, a lively area full of shops, cafes, and street music. A group of musicians were playing violins in the square, and a small crowd had gathered to watch and clap along. James stopped to listen for a while, enjoying the free entertainment. As evening came, the city lights began to turn on. James walked back toward Camden, tired but happy. His feet hurt from walking so much, but his heart felt full. For the first time since arriving, James felt truly excited about the life waiting for him in London. James started his new job the following Monday. The office was busy but friendly. On his first day, he met a young man named Oliver, who sat at the desk next to him. Oliver had short brown hair and always seemed to be smiling. "You must be the new guy," Oliver said, shaking James's hand. "Don't worry, everyone here is friendly." "Well, except maybe Derek from accounting, but nobody really talks to him anyway." James laughed. He immediately liked Oliver's sense of humor. Over the next few weeks, James and Oliver became good friends. Oliver had grown up in London, so he knew the city very well. He showed James the best cafes for lunch, the quickest way to avoid crowds on the tube, and even taught him some London slang. For example, Oliver explained that in London, people sometimes say cheers instead of thank you, and they might call a friend mate. One Friday evening after work, Oliver invited James to a traditional English pub near their office. "You can't really understand English culture," Oliver said, "until you've spent an evening in a proper pub." The pub was called the Red Lion, and it had a warm, cozy atmosphere, with wooden tables, old pictures on the walls, and a fireplace in the corner. Oliver ordered 2 pints of beer, and they sat at a table near the window. "So," Oliver said, "what do you think of London so far?" "Honestly," James replied, "it's a lot bigger and busier than I expected. But I'm starting to love it. There's always something happening." Oliver nodded. "That's London for you. It can be tiring, but it never gets boring." As they talked, a football match started on the television above the bar. Immediately, half the people in the pub turned to watch. Oliver explained that football is incredibly important in England, almost like a religion for some people. Every city and town has its own team, and fans are extremely loyal to their club. "Which team do you support?" Oliver asked. "I don't really follow football," James admitted. Oliver looked shocked, as if James had said something impossible. "Well, that has to change," he said, laughing. "Living in England without a football team is like living in France without trying the food." They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and watching the match. By the end of the night, James felt like he had made his first real friend in London. Walking home that night, slightly tired from the beer and the noise of the pub, James thought about how quickly things were changing for him. A few weeks ago, he knew nobody in this city. Now, he had a job, a friend, and a growing love for this strange, busy, wonderful place. A few months passed, and James settled comfortably into his new life. He had learned the fastest routes on the tube, found his favorite coffee shop near the office, and even started watching football matches with Oliver every weekend, slowly becoming a fan of Oliver's team. One Saturday, Oliver suggested they take a day trip outside London. "You need to see more of England, not just the city," he said. "Let's go to Oxford." Oxford is a historic city, famous around the world for its university, which is one of the oldest and most respected universities on earth. James and Oliver took an early train from London, and within an hour, they arrived in the beautiful city. Walking through Oxford felt like stepping back in time. The streets were lined with old stone buildings, tall towers, and ancient colleges, each with its own history stretching back hundreds of years. Students walked around wearing black academic gowns, hurrying between lectures with books under their arms. Oliver, who had visited Oxford before, acted as a guide. "This is Christ Church College," he explained, pointing to an enormous, impressive building. "Some scenes from the Harry Potter films were even filmed here." James looked up at the tall stone walls in amazement. It was hard to imagine that people had been studying here for centuries. Later, they visited the Bodleian Library, one of the oldest libraries in Europe, home to millions of books and ancient manuscripts. James felt a strange sense of respect, standing in a place where so much knowledge had been collected over hundreds of years. In the afternoon, they decided to try something very British: punting. Punting is a traditional activity where people sit in a long, flat wooden boat, while someone stands at the back and pushes the boat along the river using a long pole. Oliver insisted on trying it himself, even though he had never done it before. "How hard can it be?" he said confidently, picking up the pole. It turned out to be much harder than it looked. Oliver struggled to control the boat, and at one point, the pole got stuck in the mud at the bottom of the river, leaving Oliver hanging onto it while the boat slowly moved away without him. James laughed so hard that tears came to his eyes, and several other people on the riverbank laughed too. Eventually, Oliver managed to pull himself back into the boat, completely wet and covered in mud, but laughing just as hard as James. "Well," Oliver said, wiping mud off his jacket, "that's one way to remember Oxford forever." They spent the rest of the afternoon relaxing by the river, eating ice cream and watching other tourists attempt punting with similar difficulty. As the sun began to set, painting the old stone buildings a warm golden color, James felt grateful. Grateful for the beauty of this country, and grateful for a friend like Oliver, who made even the smallest adventures feel unforgettable. As autumn turned into winter, James noticed something about England that everyone had warned him about: the weather. It seemed to rain almost every single day. Some days, the sky was grey from morning until night, without a single moment of sunshine. At first, this made James feel a little sad, especially since his village back home often had clear blue skies. But slowly, James began to understand something important: the English had learned to live happily despite the weather, not because of it. Whenever it rained, people simply opened their umbrellas and continued with their day, without complaining too much. And whenever the sun did appear, even for just an hour, everyone rushed outside to enjoy it, sitting in parks or outside cafes, making the most of every ray of sunshine. One rainy Sunday afternoon, Mrs. Baker invited James to join her for afternoon tea. "It's a proper English tradition," she explained, setting a small table with a teapot, cups, sugar, milk, and a plate of scones with jam and cream. "When the weather is miserable outside, the best thing to do is make yourself warm and comfortable inside." James learned how to make his tea properly, as Mrs. Baker called it, pouring the milk first, then adding the tea, and stirring gently. He also learned how to eat a scone the correct way, splitting it in half and spreading jam and thick cream on top. Mrs. Baker told him that people in different parts of England disagree about whether the jam or the cream should go on first, and that this small disagreement has caused friendly arguments for generations. As they drank their tea, Mrs. Baker told James stories about her own life. She had grown up in a small village in the countryside, in a region called the Cotswolds, known for its beautiful golden stone houses and rolling green hills. She described long walks through fields, visits to small tea rooms, and quiet Sunday mornings at the local church. "You should visit the Cotswolds sometime," she said. "London is exciting, but the English countryside has its own kind of beauty. It's slower, quieter, but just as special." James decided to take her advice. The following weekend, he took a train out of London into the countryside. As the train moved further from the city, the tall buildings disappeared, replaced by green fields, small rivers, and old stone bridges. When he arrived in a small village in the Cotswolds, James felt like he had stepped into a postcard. The houses were built from warm, golden-colored stone, with flowers growing in every garden. A small stream ran through the center of the village, crossed by an old stone bridge. James spent the day walking slowly through the village, visiting a small bakery, and sitting by the stream, listening to the quiet sound of the water. It reminded him a little of home, but with its own unique English charm. For the first time, James understood what people meant when they said that England has two very different kinds of beauty: the busy energy of London, and the peaceful charm of its countryside. Winter arrived fully, bringing shorter days and colder air. One evening in December, James decided to visit a Christmas market in central London, one that Oliver had recommended. The market was full of small wooden stalls selling hot chocolate, mulled wine, handmade gifts, and delicious food. Colored lights hung between the stalls, and Christmas music played softly in the background. James wandered around the market alone that evening, since Oliver was busy visiting his family. He bought a cup of hot chocolate and walked slowly, enjoying the festive atmosphere. Without realizing it, he walked further than planned, deep into a part of the city he didn't know well. When James finally decided to head home, he realized he had no idea where he was. His phone had almost no battery left, and the streets around him looked completely unfamiliar. Panic started to rise in his chest. It was already dark, and the temperature was dropping quickly. James walked for almost 20 minutes, trying different streets, hoping to recognize something. Eventually, feeling cold and a little embarrassed, he decided to ask someone for help. He approached an elderly man who was walking his dog nearby. "Excuse me," James said politely. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I'm a bit lost. Could you help me find the nearest tube station?" The old man smiled kindly. "Of course, no trouble at all. Let me think for a moment." He paused, looking around. "Ah yes, if you walk straight down this road, turn left at the bakery, then right after the church, you'll find the station right there." James thanked him warmly, relieved. "No problem at all," the man replied. "We've all been lost in this city at some point. London is a maze sometimes, even for those of us who've lived here for years." As James walked away, following the directions carefully, he thought about how kind strangers had been to him throughout his time in England. Despite what some people said about the English being cold or distant, James had discovered a quiet, gentle kindness in most people he met, polite, humble, and always willing to help, even to a stranger lost in the dark. Eventually, James found the tube station exactly where the old man had described. As the warm train carried him back toward Camden, James felt a deep sense of gratitude. Being lost that evening had been frightening, but it had also shown him something beautiful about the city and its people. In the new year, Oliver suggested another trip, this time to visit one of England's oldest and most mysterious places, Stonehenge. Located in the countryside of southern England, Stonehenge is a circle of enormous stones, standing in an open field, believed to be over 4,000 years old. Nobody knows exactly why it was built, and this mystery has fascinated visitors for centuries. James and Oliver rented a car for the weekend, since the site was difficult to reach by train alone. Driving through the English countryside, James enjoyed watching the landscape change, wide green fields, small herds of sheep, and old stone farmhouses scattered across gentle hills. When they finally arrived at Stonehenge, James was surprised by how the huge stones stood alone in the middle of an open, empty field, with nothing else around them except grass and sky. A path allowed visitors to walk around the circle of stones, close enough to appreciate their enormous size, but far enough to protect them. How did people move stones this big, thousands of years ago? James asked, staring up at one of the massive stone pillars. Nobody really knows for certain, Oliver said. Some scientists believe the stones were transported from many miles away, using ropes, wooden logs, and incredible amounts of human effort. Others believe the site had some kind of religious or astronomical purpose, perhaps connected to the sun and the seasons. They walked slowly around the circle, listening to an audio guide that explained different theories about the site's history and purpose. James found himself feeling a strange, quiet respect for the people who had built something so enormous, so long ago, without any of the modern tools we have today. As the sun began to set behind the stones, casting long shadows across the field, James took a photo to send to his parents. He knew they would love seeing this ancient piece of English history. On the drive back to London, Oliver turned to James and asked, "So, be honest. Has England lived up to your expectations?" James thought for a moment before answering. "Honestly, it's exceeded them. I came here just hoping to build a career, but I've found so much more. History, friendship, a new way of understanding life." Oliver smiled. "Well, mate, I think that officially makes you a Londoner now." As December continued, James began noticing Christmas decorations appearing everywhere across the city, bright lights hanging above Oxford Street, giant Christmas trees in public squares, and store windows beautifully decorated with festive scenes. Mrs. Baker's house, too, slowly transformed, with a small Christmas tree appearing in the living room, decorated with old, colorful ornaments she had collected over many years. "Christmas is my favorite time of year," Mrs. Baker told James one evening, hanging a string of lights along the fireplace. "It's when this whole country slows down a little, and people focus on family, warmth, and kindness." Since James couldn't afford to travel home for Christmas that year, Mrs. Baker kindly invited him to spend the holiday with her and her family. On Christmas morning, James woke up to the smell of a roasting turkey filling the entire house. Mrs. Baker's daughter and grandchildren had arrived early, filling the home with laughter and excitement. James learned about many traditional English Christmas customs that day. In the morning, the family exchanged small gifts, and the children excitedly pulled open Christmas crackers, colorful paper tubes that make a small popping sound when pulled apart, revealing a paper crown, a small toy, and a silly joke written on a piece of paper. Everyone wore their paper crowns throughout lunch, even though they looked slightly ridiculous, laughing at the terrible jokes hidden inside the crackers. For Christmas lunch, they ate roast turkey with stuffing, roast potatoes, vegetables, and a rich gravy poured generously over everything. Afterwards, Mrs. Baker proudly brought out a traditional Christmas pudding, a dark, rich dessert made with dried fruits and spices, which she had prepared weeks earlier. She poured warm brandy over it and carefully lit it on fire at the table, creating a small, dramatic blue flame that made the grandchildren gasp with delight. In the afternoon, following another beloved English tradition, the whole family gathered around the television to watch the King's Christmas speech, a short televised message given every year, discussing the events of the past year and offering hope for the future. Later that evening, feeling warm, full, and happy, James sat quietly by the fireplace, watching the lights twinkle on the Christmas tree. He thought about his own family back home, missing them, but also feeling deeply thankful for the unexpected family he had found here in England. "Thank you for including me today," James told Mrs. Baker quietly. "It means more to me than you probably realize." Mrs. Baker smiled warmly. "That's what Christmas is about, love. Nobody should be alone during the holidays, especially not in a new country." As winter slowly turned into spring, James looked back at everything that had happened since he first arrived at King's Cross Station, nervous and unsure. He thought about his first English breakfast, his first tube journey, his growing friendship with Oliver, the muddy adventure in Oxford, the peaceful beauty of the Cotswolds, the ancient mystery of Stonehenge, and the warmth of his first English Christmas. One evening, sitting by the River Thames after work, watching the sun set behind the city skyline, James called his parents. "I think," he told them, "I'm going to stay in London a while longer. Maybe longer than I originally planned." His mother laughed softly on the other end of the phone. "We had a feeling you might say that." James smiled, watching the golden evening light reflect off the water, the familiar shape of Big Ben standing quietly in the distance. London had challenged him, confused him, sometimes frightened him a little, but it had also given him more than he ever expected: friendship, culture, history, and a true sense of belonging. As he walked home that evening, past busy tube stations, cozy pubs, and quiet parks, James realized something important. England wasn't just a place he had moved to anymore. Slowly, gently, without him even noticing exactly when it happened, England had become his home. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I really hope you enjoyed following James's journey through England as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you'd like, listen to this episode again, maybe even try repeating some of the sentences out loud to practice your pronunciation. Don't forget to check the vocabulary list below to review the important words from today's episode. Take care of yourselves, keep practicing every day, and I'll see you very soon in our next episode. Goodbye, everyone.